Well, I guess let's talk about the rebrand to the American Conference. Has it accomplished what you set out to accomplish in making that decision?
Well, we accomplished plenty in the 12 months that we spent working on it. Mm-hmm. And that's really a process, because with brand, I think everybody's idea of brand is like, all right, well, what's it called? But to us, like, brand has got to be more than a name. And naturally, we spent a lot of time talking to everybody on the campuses about it. Mm-hmm. But the launch has been hugely successful. What was exciting about it was we were really thoughtful about the name, right? Simplifying the name and eliminating, I think college has gotten acronym crazy, so we eliminated the acronym. Mm-hmm. But we started with, what does the brand in this conference stand for? We've been innovative in the last year and done some first mover things. It's a gritty league. You just look at the academies, they're a great example of that. Mm-hmm. And it's a real service-oriented bunch. So when you build a brand the right way, you got to start with what it stands for, and then you have to make sure it's clear. And I think we're off to a great start, and it's a start, right? Because all the work now starts where you have to get it integrated across all the campuses. But the response has been terrific. Our launch generated north of $10 million in earned media, meaning that if we wanted to buy that advertising, that's what it would have cost.
Oh, wow.
So we got a tremendous amount of buzz, and I think we're off to a great start.
So the Rise Ventures, you're trying to do some raising revenue through the Rise Ventures. I know it's probably complicated and long-winded, but in general, how do you anticipate raising revenue through Rise Ventures?
Well, I think what you see in colleges is most colleges and universities are working with third parties on all their commercial rights. Like Navy's not one. Navy's actually done it in the building for years, and they've done a tremendous job with it. But when I got to the conference, we were doing that. And as I looked at the business, and as we're looking at trying to maybe raise private capital, we have to start to generate new value inside the four walls of the conference. So we unwound all of our deals. We're the only conference that's really got a wholly owned commercial venture in the building, but it's about everything you'd expect. I think people say Rise Ventures is about sponsorship. Well, part of it is sponsorship, but there's sponsorship, there's technology, there's creative partnerships, there's licensing, there's sports betting, there's all these things that go into it. But look, our goal at the end of the day is to generate more resources and more revenue for the schools. Schools are challenged more and more every day, especially with the House settlement, by how are we going to figure out how to pay for certain things? Right. At the end of the day, resources drive a better experience for student athletes, and that's why we launched Rise. It's just a way for us to generate more value for the conference over time.
Can you talk about the value of having two historic service academies, two tradition-laden service academies, Army and Navy, as football members of the American, the value they bring? Obviously, both programs have been successful over a long haul now, under Coach Monken and here under Coach Newberry and his predecessors. Can you talk about the value of the two service academies bring?
Yeah, Wegs, I would take you all the way back to when I played in college. I played at Rutgers. I got to play against the academies, and it was just a different experience, because I don't think you see it as another football game on your schedule until you're actually in the game. Right. And you realize who you're playing against. I would be honest in saying that Army and Navy football being in this league was one of the attractive things about the job opportunity for me. And when I worked years ago when I worked at CSTV and did the first deal with Eric Rudin to put the games on, I remember saying to our investors, because we were a startup, they're like, why are we spending money on this? I said, because Navy's a national brand.
It sure is.
And they said, I said, yes, the academies are truly national brands. So to have two of those national brands in our league, and also in an era of college sports where commitment has really gotten out of focus, having two service academies that are built on a foundation of commitment, I think speaks really strongly to who we are as a conference.
I have talked to Chet Gladchuk many, many times about this. I know how important it is for the Army-Navy game to be the only entity on that second Saturday in December in that window. It's being threatened now. College football playoff expansion, if it happens, it would end up on the Army-Navy day. What is your take as a commissioner? I mean, the Army and Navy are important partners, and you need to go to bat for them, but at the same time, I know there's also expansion can be good for the American. How do you kind of toe that line of being good to Army and Navy, making sure that game still has the spotlight it deserves, but also being there for the American and possibly getting more spots in the playoff?
Listen, expansion, spoken loosely, what I would say is somebody's got to define what expansion means for me first. Okay. Right? Because people are talking about expansion, but there's all these format ideas out there. And the reality, and I've said this, I think as a conference we're unified in, we want to preserve the access we have and want the ability to earn more, which promotes sort of the same system that's in place. Give 5 conference champions the way in, and then have a broad-based at-large system so people can play their way in or earn their way in. As it relates to Army-Navy, despite the fact that that's not a conference game and we have no skin in that, Army and Navy are members of our conference, and we're going to fight to protect and defend the Army-Navy game. Having said all that, if the playoff expands and moves into that weekend, there are ways to manage it, including making sure the Army-Navy window is protected, or making sure Army and Navy, if they're in the playoff, get a seating exception, right? So they're seated in a way where they would play the second weekend, so they don't have to compromise or choose one of the games. Because I know Army and Navy people for 20 years. Faced with a choice, they're going to choose the Army-Navy game. And by the way, there's no entity in college football that is anywhere near what the Army-Navy has become.
So I think it was the Big Ten Conference recently floated some idea of 25-team playoff and getting rid of conference championships. Where are you on that, or is it such a out of nowhere thing that it hasn't even taken formation that there's no point for you to even discuss it?
There's a lot of ideas out there. What I would say on the positive side is people should continue to bring more ideas into the room to discuss, because making a decision on format, I get the fans are frustrated with where's the decision, but you got to get the decision right. And by the way, it's not easy to get it right because there's a lot of uncertainty. The 12-team thing worked out great. We're going to bet on a future. We've only got 1 year of data. And some of us are saying, well, maybe we should have a little bit more data before we expand it. But thinking outside the box, I think, is encouraging. I think the business needs to do that. It hasn't done that for a long time. Having said that, what's been floated this week, some of us read about it like you guys did. I'd actually like to hear more about it before I tell you how we feel about it. But just in general, expansion needs to be defined. Who is it being expanded for? If it provides more access for everyone, then it's worth a discussion.
Under Mike Oresco, there was the Power 6 campaign, and the Americans gone away from that. But bottom line is there's now 4 power conferences. Do you feel the American is right there, just if not barely below those 4 and above any other conference? Where do you see the American in the grand scheme of power?
Yeah, I think, I don't use the power word at all. And with due respect to you guys, I think the media made this stuff up, power, autonomy, group of 5. I think, and it's convenient and it's worked, but I see us in a lane all on our own. And I think we've proven not only through performance, but through the brands that we have, and also how we're modernizing the business. Like you mentioned, we're first movers on Rise, like a wholly owned commercial venture. We are the first mover on creating a minimum investment in revenue sharing for the schools that have opted into house. So we're looking at ourselves as ourselves. I'm not spending a lot of time, nor is anybody in our league, comparing ourselves to someone else or trying to be someone else. We're just trying to be us. And I think we have a lot of conferences outside of the American that are trying to emulate a lot of the things that we're doing too.
So with the PAC, I don't even know what to call them. That conference that got decimated is trying to reform. And there's, Memphis is a school that a lot of people say they're trying to go somewhere else, go to Big 12 or wherever. What is your take on, do you feel like the American has to expand anytime soon? And how do you protect what you have to make sure that the strong schools that you have that have made the American so good stay?
I said this from the beginning. We have to make this conference that people want to stay and people want to come to. And so far, that's been working. And as far as the Memphis thing goes, I've been transparent about it. I'm not surprised by any of that. And having been an athletic director, and I was one in the midst of the chaos when we took Rutgers into the Big Ten, your job at the end of the day is do what you think is best by your school. And I don't begrudge Memphis for exploring that. I actually admire the fact that they had the guts to take the swing that they did. But having said all that, I don't control that. We have exit provisions and exit fees and all of these things. What I do control is how do we generate more revenue and resources and value to make this a more valuable place to be to build your program. So that's where we're really spending all of our time. As far as expansion for our league goes, I take every phone call and every conversation because at the end of the day, that's the job. Right. You have to create new value for the league. But expansion for expansion's sake doesn't make sense. And a lot of the schools I've spoken to, I've said, if we can bring new value, the way to look at it is, can you pay for yourself and you can provide more to everybody else? Yeah. If there's more value to be had, maybe it's worth a conversation. But if it's just to get bigger for bigger's sake, that's not always a recipe for success.
How exciting is it with all that you've done during the off season with the branding to get the teams on the field to really make it what it's all about?
Well, I just told Coach New that. He's like, how you feeling? I'm like, I'm ready to line up and play. Football season is, I think probably because I had my own experience, just a special time of year. But we do so much in the off season to get ready for this, and it's exciting. I'm ready. Like, I'm going out to 4 games next weekend and the first weekend, so we're ready to go. And I also think this is going to be a competitively deep league. Last year people said to me, well, you know what's going to happen, and I was like, I gave up on trying to predict the games, because in the middle of November, Navy, Army, Tulane, and Memphis were all in the hunt, and they were all in the national conversation. And I think as a commissioner, you feel like, all right, you had no say in that happening, but you feel like you're doing it, like you're getting to the right place. So we're excited for football season. I think this is going to be a really exciting year. We're competitively deep. I think people have predicted what's going to happen, but as evidenced last year in the second half, people had it figured out, and look what happened at the end of the year.
And with a program like Navy, with all the buzz that's sort of been during the off season, that buzz continues over to the American, because a lot of folks say, yeah, Navy, they're a player and they're a big part of the American.
Yeah, look, Navy's been ranked in the top 25 5 of the 10 years they've been in the conference. And if you look at the list of autonomy schools that they've beaten throughout that time too, there's a lot of big names on that list. And I know from my own experience playing against Navy in 1992, like, score aside, like, they're going to come at you every single play, and it's a challenging system to get ready for. When I worked as an athletic director, I remember our coach, Navy week, like, you didn't go near him because he wasn't in a good mood getting ready for Navy, because it's one of the more challenging games you have to play. But Navy and also we have Army in the league, they are national brands. The success that the academies had last year brought a ton of the national spotlight onto the American at a great time when we were making a lot of change.
And a lot of that's on a national stage also, when you talk about a Notre Dame game and the Army-Navy game, bringing eyeballs to the American.
It's great. We control with our own TV rights, and ESPN does a tremendous job, and I know CBS, who's also a partner with us on the basketball side, does a great job for Navy, but we get the benefit of that exposure when Navy goes to Notre Dame, and Army-Navy's on CBS is the only game in town. We took every advantage of it. You can ask Eric Rudin and Rob Dunn and the Navy guys and the guys at Army. I drove everybody crazy last year trying to make sure that the American logo got on the field at the Army-Navy game. And it's just a great opportunity for more exposure and an opportunity for us to build our brand.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.